Hello and welcome back to our channel. It's Lois here from Lois and Morgana Davidson Art, and today I'm going to be sharing with you this beginner-friendly loose watercolour painting. It's a semi-abstract scene and a beautiful misty watercolour sunset using salt effects to paint the foreground. I'm using a limited palette today. I'm using Venetian Red, Burnt Sienna, Sepia, Payne's Grey and Indigo. I've got a 1.5 inch Watercolor brush, 3/4 inch flat, a rigger brush, my palette knife and some ordinary fine ground table salt. But just before we get into the painting, a quick promo for my book, Landscapes in Watercolour, Techniques and Tutorials for the Complete Beginner. There's a couple of links in the description below if you're interested. It's jam-packed with techniques and tips, and there are 10 projects to get you started. So back to today's project. I'm using Milford cold press watercolour paper. It's taped to my board with ordinary decorator's masking tape, and my board's at an angle of about 20 to 30 degrees. This helps with the flow of the washes as I paint. I'm wetting the page all over because I'm going to be painting using the wet in wet method to start with to get some lovely soft diffusions of colour. I'm using my large Watercolor brush to wet the page all over with clean water, and I'm going to paint a variegated wash using Venetian Red, which is also known as light red, and Indigo, and this will give me my sky and my lake. I'm using horizontal brush strokes just to get this wash nice and smooth. You can see the indigo being introduced here. There's a little bit of indigo in with the light red as well, just to take that terracotta colour down. But as it dries, I'm hoping that we'll get quite a pretty sort of pinkish, orangey sunset glow. I've turned my board around 45 degrees, so gravity is now pulling the paint down. I'll just make some slight adjustments. Clean damp brush to just pull out and lift a bit of the paint here and there, just to add variety to the misty background. Now that the wash is just about done, I've turned my board back round again, and I'm using a piece of paper tissue to wipe off the tape where there is some water and some paint, to make sure that doesn't find its way back into my washes and create unsightly marks. I've dipped into a dry, rich, creamy mix of light red, indigo, sepia and burnt sienna, and I'm using the corner of my Watercolor brush to dab in my foreground, just getting in some nice variety, but subtle varieties of colour and tone across the foreground, and I'll continue working and building up my distant headlands and tree lines that will eventually disappear into the mist. And now I'm softening the edge of the lake and the distant tree lines with a clean damp flat brush, and I'm using the tips of that clean flat brush to lift out a bit of paint across the lake and to hopefully begin to get those kind of like subtle mist on the water effects. Dragging down a little bit of the paint, the rich paint from those headlands down into the water. Just to give the hint of reflection. I don't want much reflection because it's misty, so you wouldn't see much, but just a little bit of a hint of reflection, and then re-establishing that paler waterline. Now I've laid my board flat because I don't need gravity to help diffuse the paint. I want it to stay where it is. I'm using my palette knife, and I'm going to etch through the rich paint with the tip of the palette knife to suggest bushes and trees undergrowth, branches, grasses, that sort of thing. Still working through using my flat brush to just lift out a little bit more paint and just add a bit more texture to the surface of the water. I'm going to sprinkle some salt. This is ordinary fine ground table salt across this damp paint in the foreground, and this will just add to the sticks and twigs and bushes and things that I've just scraped into the rich paint. It'll give me tiny little blooms and little blossoms which will suggest sort of flowers, seed heads, that sort of thing. Just running the palette knife through the paint just before it dries in the distance, just to add a few hints of branches, just maybe catching a little bit of light through the mist. I now need to leave this to dry completely. And here's the dry painting. Just about all the elements are in place. I just need to enhance a few things, add a few darks to the foreground and put in some sort of harder marks. If you look closely, you can see the pretty patterns that have been created by the salt grains pushing away the paint and making these lovely little shapes and patterns, interspersed, of course, with the palette knife marks that I've scraped through the rich paint. So the first thing that I'm going to do is begin to introduce some slightly darker paint and paint around some of the lighter marks and just bring some shadows up and negatively paint around some of those sticks and twigs with these shadow colours, which is mixed from just a mixture of what's left on my palette from what I used to paint. So it's all the colours mixed together to create a nice dark, and I'm using my rigger brush for this. And once I've established some foreground shadows, I will then work around the marks that I etched in to create this little tree, the bushes, and all these little weeds and grasses and things with the rigger brush and my dark colour. I hope you can see how effective it is to pull the upper branches of this small foreground tree over the horizon line, and this adds to the depth and distance. This brings the foreground into focus. It also adds to that kind of misty feeling of the background, which is less distinct because it's all been painted wet in wet and is softly diffused. So just a few sort of finishing touches here and there, a few more branches. And I hope you enjoyed watching me paint this. Once I've finished just these last finishing touches, then I'll be able to remove the tape and have a look at it and see how it looks with its clean white border. Once we see it sort of cleaned up like this, so to speak, we get a fresh look at it. We can see if we do need to do anything else to it. And looking at it with a critical eye is quite an important part of learning to paint in watercolour. And while I'm really happy with the way this has turned out, there's a few things that beginners I'd especially like you to note. Somehow I've got my horizon line almost bang in the middle of the painting. This kind of sort of splits the painting in two and makes it slightly less effective composition. Really, I should have my horizon either slightly lower or slightly higher. So if you try this, then please try to position your horizon line lower or higher than I've done with mine. And also my shadows or reflections on the lake dried a little bit lighter than I would have liked them. I would have liked to be a little bit darker. So if you can just emphasise your shadows a little bit more, you'll end up with a much more effective painting. If you're interested in lots more in-depth teaching over on Patreon, then click on the link below. You'll also find advert-free versions of these YouTube demos over there for you to watch. And you can post your work in the community group chat there, the Art Studio. So many thanks for watching. Please leave us a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, as that really helps with our reach. And thank you so much to all our wonderful community of artists that support us on our Patreon pages. And if you'd like to support the channel, then there are links to go to Patreon in the description below. I'll see you again soon. Take care and happy painting. Bye.